What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to another segment of the Neighborhood Podcast. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast, Kevin Valentin, and today we are going to be discussing our AFC North predictions. Obviously, we all know last year the Bengals went all the way to the Super Bowl, falling short, leading that division and winning it at a record of 10-7, followed by the Pittsburgh Steelers at 9-7-1. Then you had the Cleveland Browns at 8-9, and the Baltimore Ravens at 8-9. So, Kyle, with a fully healthy division and some looming questions in this division as well, what are your predictions for the AFC North?
Well, I think for the top spot, who's going to claim this division, I think it's going to be the Cincinnati Bengals once again. I'm not going to say whether or not they're going to go to the Super Bowl. I'm just talking about the division itself. I think the Bengals are in prime position to take this division by storm, just simply because I think they have the best roster to work with out of any team that's in this division. When I look at the Bengals specifically, they made some great adjustments on their offensive line, and they desperately needed that compared to any other team in the division. They went out and got some key acquisitions like Ted Karras. They were able to get La'el Collins. They were also able to get Alex Kappa to really solidify that offensive front. I mean, for God's sakes, Joe Burrow got sacked over 70 times throughout the entire year last year, including the playoffs as well. So Cincinnati did their homework this offseason, and they really bolstered that part of the offense. And I think it's going to lead to another great season for Joe Burrow and that offense. You talk about the targets that he has and Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I mean, these guys are going to be able to light it up. And then Joe Mixon coming out of the backfield. There's no reason for me to say otherwise. The Bengals are going to pretty much take this division pretty easily. In second place, I have the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are kind of in a tricky situation just simply because I don't know how effective their wide receiver core is going to be. When I look at Baltimore from last year, I mean, Lamar Jackson single-handedly carried that team until he got hurt about halfway through the season. And then they essentially fell apart. And I think Lamar Jackson is going to have to kind of take that burden on his shoulders once again, simply just because he's not going to have really anybody to throw to. The best targets that he has at the wide receiver position right now are Duvernay and Bateman. And then you could throw Mark Andrews in there, but he's a tight end. I'm just specifically talking about the wideouts. The wideouts is not their strong suit going into this year, so it's going to be a lot of Lamar Jackson. They do get J.K. Dobbins back from a torn ACL, so that's going to be huge for the offense. But I think their defense is still going to be shaky. Marcus Peters is coming off an ACL tear as well. There's a lot of questions when it comes to that defense. Obviously, you have Marlon Humphrey, who's one of the best corners in the league, but we'll kind of see how this defense plays out. But I really do think the defense is the Achilles heel for this team. But I do think that Baltimore will finish second place. They could possibly try to get a wild card spot at the end of the year, but I do think that second place is going to be their destination for this season upcoming. When it comes to the third and fourth teams, you can honestly kind of flip back and forth between the Browns and the Steelers. I'm going to put the Browns in third place simply just because I don't know whether or not Deshaun Watson is going to be in for the Browns this year. It's really all dependent on whether or not he only gets suspended 6 games, with the original suggestion for how long he should be suspended. But the NFL has already appealed that suspension. I think Roger Goodell is already looking at possibly a year-long suspension. That were some of the quotes that I heard from him within the last week or so. If he's suspended for the entire year in regards to Deshaun Watson, Cleveland's probably going to end up in last place. It really is kind of dependent on how this whole suspension goes with Deshaun. And then to round out the division, I've got the Steelers in fourth place. The Steelers have Mitchell Trubisky. That is a huge downgrade compared to Ben Roethlisberger. Granted, Roethlisberger was pretty much already retired when he took the field last year to begin with, but Mitchell Trubisky is not necessarily the best quarterback to roll with, in my humble opinion. Wouldn't surprise me if Kenny Pickett eventually gets the starting job at some point down the line in this season. But I will say that when it comes to their offense, the Steelers have always been able to bolster a pretty solid wide receiver core. They have Chase Claypool. They have Deontay Johnson, who's just coming off of a pretty solid extension. George Pickens, who's been getting a lot of attention in training camp for Pittsburgh. He's somebody that could fill that third spot for them. And then their defense is pretty solid. I think their defense is really going to have to step up pretty huge here just because I don't think that their offense is going to be able to light up the scoreboard like they did in the past with Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown in the fold. It's just simply not the case anymore. So to round this out, I got the Bengals in first place, the Ravens in second place. I'll put the Browns in for third. It's kind of dependent on the Deshaun Watson suspension. And then to round out the division, I have the Steelers finishing in last place.